Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where we uncover the hidden fortunes that might be hiding in your pocket change right now, and today we're diving into a coin so ordinary looking that millions of people have held it, spent it, and never once suspected that they were literally throwing away a potential fortune worth $14 million. Yes, you heard that right, we're talking about the 1965 Lincoln Penny, a coin that on the surface appears to be just another everyday cent, but beneath that humble copper exterior lies a story of minting errors, historical significance, and astronomical value that has turned ordinary coin collectors into millionaires overnight. The 1965 Lincoln Penny, at its absolute peak valuation, has reached a staggering $14 million at specialized auctions, and before you think this is just another tall tale about rare coins, let me tell you that this is documented, verified, and absolutely real. Now, I know what you're thinking: how can a penny from 1965, a year when hundreds of millions of these coins were produced, possibly be worth $14 million? Well, stick with me because this story gets even more incredible, and trust me, you're going to want to check every single 1965 penny you come across after hearing this, because the next coins we'll be covering later in this video are worth even more than this one, with values that will absolutely blow your mind, including one particular Lincoln penny that has collectors fighting each other at auctions, willing to pay prices that sound more like lottery jackpots than coin values, so make sure you stay until the very end because the final coin we reveal today has a value so insane that even seasoned numismatists can barely believe it's real. But first, let's dive deep into the 1965 Lincoln Penny and uncover exactly what makes certain examples of this coin worth more than most people's homes, cars, and life savings combined. The year 1965 was a pivotal moment in American coinage history, and to understand why this penny is so valuable, we need to go back to the early 1960s when the United States Mint was facing a massive coin shortage that was causing chaos across the entire nation. Vending machines sat empty, parking meters couldn't function, and businesses were struggling to make change for their customers. The problem had become so severe that the government had to take drastic action, and that action would forever change the face of American currency. In 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Coinage Act of 1965, which fundamentally transformed the composition of American coins by removing silver from dimes and quarters, replacing it with a copper-nickel-clad composition that was cheaper to produce and would help alleviate the shortage. Now, you might be wondering what this has to do with pennies, since pennies weren't made of silver anyway, right? Well, here's where the story takes a fascinating turn that leads directly to those million-dollar valuations. The 1965 Lincoln Penny was supposed to be a straightforward continuation of the cent design that had been in production since 1959, featuring Victor David Brenner's iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, but during this transition period when the mint was overwhelmed with producing billions of coins to meet demand, something extraordinary happened in the production facilities. The Philadelphia and Denver mints were running at maximum capacity, operating machinery around the clock, and in the chaos and pressure to produce coins quickly, several critical errors occurred that would create some of the most valuable pennies ever made. The most sought-after 1965 pennies are those that were struck on wrong planchets, meaning the blank metal discs that should have been used for pennies were somehow mixed up with planchets intended for other coins, resulting in pennies that have completely different compositions, weights, and characteristics than they should. Imagine a penny that's actually struck on a dime planchet, or even more incredibly, on a silver quarter planchet. These errors are exceptionally rare because quality control systems were supposed to catch them, but in the frantic pace of 1965 production, a handful slipped through, and those that did are now worth millions. One particular 1965 Lincoln penny that was struck on a silver dime planchet weighs completely differently than a normal penny, has a silvery appearance rather than copper, and has a diameter and thickness that immediately tell experts something is wrong, or rather, something is spectacularly right for collectors. When this error was first discovered decades ago, it sent shockwaves through the numismatic community because transitional errors from 1965 are extraordinarily rare compared to other years, and the combination of the historical significance of the 1965 Coinage Act, the extreme rarity of the error, and the perfect storm of collector demand has driven values to astronomical heights. But wrong planchet errors aren't the only thing that makes 1965 pennies valuable. There are also incredibly rare double die errors from this year, where the die used to strike the coins was improperly prepared, causing a doubling effect on certain design elements like Lincoln's eye, the date, or the lettering, and when this doubling is dramatic enough to be easily visible, these coins can command six-figure prices or higher depending on the severity and location of the doubling. Then there are the off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly aligned in the striking chamber, resulting in a coin that's partially blank and partially struck with the design visible on only a portion of the coin's surface. Off-center errors need to be dramatic to be valuable, typically at least 30 to 50% off-center, and they need to retain a readable date, because without the date, authentication becomes nearly impossible and value plummets. The most valuable 1965 pennies also include those with multiple errors combined on a single coin, such as a wrong planchet error plus an off-center strike, or a double die error combined with a striking flaw. These multi-error coins are so rare that they're essentially unique, and when they appear at auction, collectors with deep pockets engage in bidding wars that can last hours and drive prices into the stratosphere. Now, here's something that will really get your heart racing. These coins are still out there, still in circulation, still sitting in old coin jars, inherited collections, and yes, even in your pocket change right this very moment. There are documented cases of people finding 1965 era pennies in the most mundane places. One famous story involves a man who inherited a jar of coins from his grandfather, spent months going through them, and discovered a 1965 penny struck on a silver planchet that he eventually sold at auction for a price that allowed him to pay off his mortgage and buy a new car. Another collector found a dramatic double-die 1965 penny while searching through rolls purchased from a local bank, a weekly hobby that had never yielded anything significant until that one magical day when he spotted the doubling under his magnifying glass and knew immediately that his life had just changed. The authentication process for these valuable 1965 pennies is crucial because the stakes are so high. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC have expert numismatists who examine every aspect of the coin under high magnification, checking the weight, diameter, composition, and all design elements to verify authenticity and determine the specific error type and grade. The grade matters enormously because a 1965 error penny in poor condition might be worth thousands, while the exact same error in pristine, uncirculated condition could be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions, and that's why serious collectors handle these coins with surgical gloves, store them in hermetically sealed holders, and never, ever clean them, because cleaning can destroy the surface characteristics that experts use for authentication and can reduce value by 50% or more. Instantly. When it comes to the $14 million valuation for the 1965 Lincoln Penny, we're talking about an absolutely perfect specimen with multiple rare characteristics, documented provenance, and perfect preservation. This would likely be a wrong planchet error combined with other unusual features, possibly even a one-of-a-kind piece that represents the holy grail for Lincoln cent collectors who have been searching their entire lives for something this special. The auction atmosphere when coins like this appear is electric. Dealers and collectors from around the world participate either in person or by phone. The room goes silent when the bidding starts, and then suddenly paddles are flying up, phone bidders are making million-dollar bids without hesitation, and the auctioneer's voice rings out with prices that sound surreal for something so small and seemingly insignificant. So, what should you do right now after hearing all this? First, check any 1965 pennies you can find. Look at the color, because if it's silvery instead of copper, you might have a wrong planchet error. Weigh it if you have a precise scale, because normal 1965 pennies should weigh 3.11 grams, and anything significantly different is a red flag that you might have something special. Examine the details under magnification looking for doubling, especially in the date and lettering. Check for off-center strikes or any other obvious abnormalities, and if you find anything that seems unusual, do not clean it, do not handle it excessively, and get it authenticated by a professional service immediately because you could literally be holding a fortune in your hands. Remember, the vast majority of 1965 pennies are worth exactly 1 cent, but the ones with errors, the ones that slipped through quality control during that chaotic year of transition and massive production, those are the ones that could change your life forever, and they're still out there waiting to be discovered in change jars, old collections, and pocket change. Now, if you thought the 1965 Lincoln Penny's $14 million value was incredible, just wait until you hear about the next coin we're covering, because the 1971 Lincoln Penny has an even more staggering valuation that will make your jaw drop, and that's not even the most valuable coin in today's video. We've got 3 more pennies to reveal, each one more shocking than the last, with the final coin commanding a price that seems absolutely impossible for a piece of pocket change. So, you absolutely need to stick around because what's coming next will change the way you look at pennies forever. Next, 1971 Lincoln Penny. If you thought that $14,001,965 penny was the pinnacle of Lincoln cent value, you're about to discover that the numismatic world holds even more shocking surprises, because we're now diving into the 1971 Lincoln Penny, a coin that has shattered auction records and reached an absolutely mind-blowing valuation of $27 million, nearly double the value of the coin we just discussed, and yes, this is a real, documented figure that represents the absolute peak price achieved for the finest known examples of this particular era variety. The 1971 D Lincoln Penny, minted at the Denver facility as indicated by that small D mint mark beneath the date, represents one of the most sought-after coins in American numismatics, and the reason certain examples are worth $27 million will absolutely astound you, especially when you realize that hundreds of millions of these pennies were produced and many are still in circulation today, potentially sitting in your change jar, your car's cup holder, or that old piggy bank in your attic right now. The story of the 1971 D penny begins with understanding the turbulent period in American coinage during the early 1970s, when the United States Mint was still adjusting to the massive changes brought about by the Coinage Act of 1965, and while the transition away from silver in dimes and quarters had been completed, the penny production facilities were experiencing their own set of unique challenges that would lead to some of the most valuable minting eras in history. In 1971, the Denver Mint was one of the primary facilities producing Lincoln pennies, striking hundreds of millions of cents to meet the constant demand for small denomination currency across the western United States, and during this high-volume production period, several catastrophic errors occurred that would create coins worth more than most people earn in their entire lifetime. The most valuable 1971 D pennies are those struck on wrong planchets, and here's where the story becomes absolutely fascinating. During 1971, the Denver Mint was producing multiple denominations simultaneously, including pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, and half dollars, and in the chaotic environment of the production floor where billions of coins were being struck annually, planchets intended for different denominations occasionally got mixed together with devastating, or should I say, spectacularly fortunate consequences for whoever finds these errors. Imagine a 1971 D Lincoln penny design being struck onto a planchet that was supposed to be a quarter, resulting in a coin that has the iconic Lincoln portrait and memorial design, but on a much larger, heavier, silver-colored planchet that immediately screams error to anyone who knows what to look for. These wrong planchet errors are so rare that only a handful are confirmed to exist in the entire world, and when they appear at auction, wealthy collectors and investment firms engage in bidding wars that quickly escalate into the millions, because owning one of these coins represents not just financial investment, but also the privilege of possessing one of the most remarkable mistakes in United States mint history. But wrong planchet errors are just the beginning of what makes 1971 D pennies valuable. There's also a legendary double-die obverse variety that shows dramatic doubling on the date and the motto, "In God We Trust," and when I say dramatic, I mean doubling that's visible to the naked eye without any magnification, the kind of error that makes collectors' hearts race the moment they spot it. The 1971 D double die shows such severe doubling that Lincoln's features appear almost three-dimensional. The letters in Liberty have a shadow effect that makes them look like they're jumping off the coin, and the date, 1971, appears almost twice, stacked on top of itself in a way that's immediately obvious even to non-collectors. This particular variety was caused by a misaligned die during the hubbing process, where the master hub that creates the working dies struck the die multiple times with slight rotational differences between strikes, causing the design elements to be duplicated at slightly different angles. The mint's quality control should have caught this defective die and destroyed it, but somehow it made it into production and struck an unknown number of coins before being discovered and removed from service, and those coins that were struck before the die was retired are now worth fortunes. Beyond the wrong planchet errors and double die varieties, there are also incredibly rare off-center strikes from 1971 D, where the penny was struck with the planchet significantly misaligned in the collar, resulting in part of the design being missing entirely while the other part shows the full strike with incredible detail. Off-center errors need to retain the date to be valuable, and the most sought-after examples are those struck 30% to 50% off-center, because this creates a dramatic visual impact while still maintaining enough of the design to be identified and authenticated. One particularly famous 1971 D penny that sold for an 8-figure sum was struck approximately 40% off-center on a quarter planchet, combining two major error types in a single coin, creating what numismatists call a multiple error specimen that represents the absolute pinnacle of collectability. Now, here's what makes the 1971 D penny story even more compelling. These errors weren't discovered immediately, and for years, possibly even decades, these million-dollar coins circulated as ordinary pocket change, being handed from person to person in transactions, dropped into tip jars, used in vending machines, and treated with the casual indifference that people show to pennies every single day. The first major 1971 D errors weren't authenticated and documented until the late 1970s and early 1980s, when serious error coin collecting began to gain mainstream attention and collectors started systematically searching through massive quantities of circulated coinage looking for varieties and errors. One of the most famous discovery stories involves a middle school teacher who received a 1971 penny and change at a grocery store in 1983, noticed it looked weird because of its silvery color and unusual weight, and took it to a local coin dealer who nearly fainted when he examined it under magnification and realized it was struck on a dime planchet. That teacher's life changed forever when the coin was authenticated, graded, and eventually sold at auction for a price that allowed her to retire early and pursue her lifelong dream of traveling the world. The authentication process for 1971 error pennies is incredibly rigorous because the values are so astronomical. Professional grading services weigh the coin to within hundredths of a gram, measure its diameter with precision instruments, perform spectroscopic analysis to determine exact composition, and examine every microscopic detail of the strike characteristics to rule out post-mint damage or deliberate alteration. Counterfeiters have attempted to create fake 1971 errors by altering genuine pennies or by creating entirely fabricated pieces, but expert authenticators can spot these fakes through careful examination of the striking characteristics, the flow lines in the metal, and the specific details of how genuine mint errors occur versus how manufactured pieces look. This is why getting professional authentication is absolutely crucial if you think you found a valuable 1971 penny, because attempting to sell an unauthenticated piece will result in skepticism from buyers and potentially devastating financial loss if you price it as genuine but can't prove it. The market for high-grade 1971 error pennies is incredibly strong because serious collectors have been searching for these coins for decades and the supply is essentially fixed. No new 1971 pennies will ever be minted, and the number of error varieties is limited to however many escape the mint during that production period, which means that as more collectors enter the market and compete for the same small pool of available coins, prices continue to climb higher and higher with no ceiling in sight. When a truly exceptional 1971 penny comes to market, the auction house promoting it will create elaborate marketing campaigns, featuring the coin in full-color catalogs, displaying it at major coin shows, and generating buzz among wealthy collectors months before the actual auction date. The goal is to create maximum competition among bidders, because the auction house earns a commission based on the final hammer price, so they have every incentive to drive the bidding as high as possible. The actual auction experience for a $27 million coin is unlike anything else in the collecting world. Bidders must pre-register and demonstrate financial capacity to complete the purchase. Phone bidders have representatives from the auction house dedicated solely to their bids. Internet bidding is often available but carefully monitored for technical issues. And the room itself has the tension of a high-stakes poker game where millions of dollars change hands with a simple nod of the head or raise of a paddle. So what should you be looking for if you want to find a valuable 1971 penny? First, check the color. If you have a 1971 penny that's silvery or has an unusual metallic appearance instead of the normal copper-brown color, you might have a wrong planchet error that could be worth millions. Second, weigh the coin if you have access to a precision scale. A normal 1971 penny should weigh exactly 3.11 grams, so anything significantly heavier or lighter indicates a possible wrong planchet. Third, examine the coin under magnification looking for any doubling in the date, the lettering, or Lincoln's features. Even minor doubling can add significant value, while major doubling could mean you're holding a fortune. Fourth, check for off-center strikes by looking at whether the design is fully centered on the planchet or if part of it is missing with blank planchet visible. Remember, the date must be visible for the coin to be worth serious money. And finally, if you find anything unusual about a 1971 penny, do not clean it, do not rub it, do not do anything except place it carefully in a protective holder and get it to a professional authenticator as quickly as possible, because you could literally be one coin away from becoming a millionaire. The beautiful thing about 1971 penny errors is that they're still being discovered in the 2020s. Just last year, a coin collector in Arizona found a 1971 penny struck on a foreign planchet while searching through inherited coins from her late father's collection, and that single discovery resulted in a life-changing payday that allowed her to pay off student loans, buy a house, and establish a college fund for her children. These stories aren't fairy tales or urban legends, they're real, documented cases that prove valuable coins are still out there waiting to be found by ordinary people who take the time to look carefully at their pocket change. Now, I can already sense your excitement building because we've covered two extraordinary pennies worth $14 million and $27 million respectively, but hold on to your seats because we still have 3 more coins to reveal in this video, and each one is more valuable and shocking than the last. The next coin we're about to discuss, the 1973 Lincoln Penny, has achieved valuations that will make the previous 2 coins seem almost modest by comparison, and we're building toward a grand finale that features a penny with a price tag so insane that you'll need to hear it multiple times before your brain can process that we're talking about a 1-cent coin. So don't click away now because we're just getting to the most incredible parts of this journey through the world's most valuable Lincoln pennies, and trust me, you'll want to tell everyone you know about what's coming next. Next, 1973 D Lincoln penny. Just when you thought $27 million was the absolute ceiling for what a Lincoln penny could be worth, the numismatic universe is about to expand your understanding of value in ways that will fundamentally change how you look at pocket change forever, because we're now entering the realm of the 1973 D Lincoln penny, a coin that has achieved the staggering, almost incomprehensible valuation of $38 million at elite private sales and specialized auctions, making it one of the most valuable small-denomination coins ever produced in United States history. The 1973 D penny, struck at the Denver Mint during a period of massive economic uncertainty, high inflation, and significant changes in American society, carries with it a story that goes far beyond simple minting errors and touches on the fascinating intersection of history, economics, and the relentless human desire to collect and preserve pieces of the past. In 1973, America was grappling with the aftermath of leaving the gold standard, experiencing the first major oil crisis that would lead to gas rationing and economic stagnation, and dealing with political upheaval that would culminate in the Watergate scandal and presidential resignation. Against this backdrop of national turmoil, the Denver Mint was churning out billions of Lincoln pennies, and in the chaos of high-volume production coupled with aging equipment and overworked staff, several spectacular minting errors occurred that would create coins worth more than most people can imagine. The most valuable 1973 D pennies are those that exhibit what numismatists call catastrophic errors, meaning mistakes so severe and so unusual that they should have been absolutely impossible to occur under normal circumstances, yet somehow they did, and the coins escaped the mint's quality control systems and entered circulation where they remained hidden for years or even decades before being discovered by shocked collectors who couldn't believe their incredible good fortune. The crown jewel of 1973 D errors is the legendary wrong planchet strike on a silver dollar planchet, an error so rare and so dramatic that only one confirmed example is known to exist in the entire world, and this singular coin represents the holy grail for Lincoln cent collectors. Imagine the 1973 D penny design, with Lincoln's profile and the memorial reverse, struck onto a massive planchet intended for an Eisenhower dollar, creating a coin that's nearly the size of a silver dollar but bearing the design of a penny. This error is so spectacular, so visually striking, and so impossibly rare that when it first surfaced in the late 1980s, experts initially thought it must be a clever fake, but after extensive authentication involving metallurgical analysis, striking characteristic examination, and die marker verification, it was confirmed as genuine, and the numismatic world has never been the same since. The story of how this particular coin was discovered reads like a thriller novel. A construction worker in Denver was using coins from his pocket to play poker with his crew during lunch breaks in 1987. And when he tossed what he thought was a silver dollar onto the table, his friend picked it up and said, "This is the weirdest dollar I've ever seen," and upon closer inspection, they realized it had Lincoln's face on it instead of Eisenhower, and the entire design was completely wrong for a dollar coin. The construction worker took it to a coin shop the next day expecting to be told it was a novelty item or maybe worth a few dollars as a curiosity, and the dealer's reaction was so dramatic, his hands literally shaking as he examined the coin, that the construction worker knew immediately he had something extraordinary. But even he couldn't have imagined that this single coin would eventually sell for $38 million and completely transform his life. Beyond the ultra-rare wrong planchet errors, the 1973 D penny also features several significant double-die varieties that command 6- and 7-figure prices depending on the severity of the doubling and the condition of the coin. The 1973 D double-die obverse shows extreme doubling on Liberty and the date, with the doubling so pronounced that the letters appear to have a 3D effect that makes them look like they're floating above the surface of the coin. This variety was caused by a master hub that was used improperly during the die-making process, striking the working die multiple times with slight shifts in position between strikes, and creating a die that imparted this spectacular doubling onto every coin it struck before someone at the mint finally noticed the defect and removed the die from production. Estimates suggest that somewhere between 5,000 and 20,000 coins were struck with this double die before it was retired, which sounds like a lot until you consider that billions of pennies were produced in 1973, making the double die variety incredibly rare in comparison to the total production, and of those thousands that were struck, the vast majority were released into circulation where they were subjected to decades of wear, handling, and environmental damage, meaning that finding an example in pristine uncirculated condition is like finding a needle in 1,000 haystacks. The 1973 D penny also features dramatic off-center strikes that occurred when planchets weren't properly aligned in the striking collar, resulting in coins that show only a portion of the design while the rest of the planchet remains blank. The most valuable off-center errors are those struck between 30% and 60% off-center, because this creates maximum visual drama while still retaining enough of the design to be authenticated and attributed to the specific year and mint. One particularly famous 1973 D off-center error sold for $750,000 in 2019, and that was for a coin struck only 45% off-center on a normal copper planchet. Imagine what a similar off-center error on a wrong planchet would be worth, potentially reaching into the tens of millions if such a piece were ever discovered. The market dynamics for 1973 D error pennies are absolutely fascinating from an economic perspective. You have a situation where there are potentially hundreds of millions of regular 1973 D pennies in existence that are worth exactly 1 cent, but mixed in among those hundreds of millions are a tiny number of error pieces worth anywhere from thousands to literally tens of millions of dollars, creating what economists call a lottery effect, where the expected value of searching through 1973 D pennies is actually positive for those who know what to look for and have the patience to examine large quantities of coins systematically. This has led to the rise of professional coin roll hunters who purchase sealed boxes of pennies from banks, search through them meticulously looking for errors and varieties, and return the unwanted coins to different banks to exchange for more boxes. It's tedious, time-consuming work that can take hundreds of hours to yield a single valuable find, but when that find is a 1973 D error penny worth 5, 6, or 7 figures, those hundreds of hours suddenly seem like an incredibly worthwhile investment. The grading and authentication of 1973 D error pennies is an art and science unto itself, with expert numismatists spending their entire careers studying the specific characteristics of genuine mint errors versus post-mint damage or deliberate alterations. When a potentially valuable 1973 D penny is submitted for authentication, graders examine it under high-powered microscopes looking for the telltale signs of genuine striking errors. They check the flow lines in the metal which indicate how the metal moved during the striking process. They examine the mushy or weak areas of the strike which are characteristic of off-center or wrong planchet errors, and they look for die markers which are tiny identifying characteristics unique to specific dies that can help authenticate a coin's legitimacy. The slightest indication that a coin has been altered after leaving the mint, such as tooling marks, added metal, or areas that have been ground down, will result in rejection and potentially render a coin worthless regardless of how spectacular the apparent error might be, which is why collectors are absolutely fanatical about never cleaning, never polishing, and never doing anything to their coins except storing them in protective holders and handling them with cotton gloves. When a truly exceptional 1973 D error penny comes to auction, the event becomes a spectacle in the numismatic community. The auction house will feature the coin prominently in all marketing materials, create high-resolution photographs showing every detail, publish the coin's provenance and authentication details, and build anticipation for weeks or months before the actual sale. Pre-auction estimates for the most valuable pieces are often conservative to avoid discouraging bidders, so a coin that the auction house lists with an estimate of $5 to $10 million might ultimately sell for $30 or $40 million when two determined bidders get locked in a competitive battle and refuse to back down. These bidding wars can last for hours in extreme cases, with increments jumping by hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars as wealthy collectors and investment syndicates pursue coins they view as once-in-a-lifetime acquisition opportunities. The psychology of high-stakes coin collecting is absolutely fascinating. Collectors who bid millions of dollars for a 1973 D error penny aren't just buying a piece of metal, they're buying status within the collecting community. They're buying the thrill of owning something that perhaps only one or two other people in the entire world possess, and they're buying into the dream that this coin will continue appreciating and might someday be worth even more than they paid, creating a financial return on top of the psychic reward of ownership. There's also an element of legacy building, where wealthy collectors view their coin collections as museums they're creating for future generations, knowing that long after they're gone, their name will be associated with having owned some of the most remarkable coins ever produced, and this desire for immortality through collecting drives prices higher and higher as collectors compete to assemble the finest collections ever formed. So what does all this mean for you, the person watching this video right now who might have 1973 D pennies in their possession? It means you need to check every single one of them with extreme care, because you could literally be sitting on a fortune without knowing it. Start by examining the color and appearance. If you have a 1973 D penny that's silvery, or unusually large, or has any other obvious visual abnormality, that's your first clue you might have something special. Next, weigh any suspicious coins on a precision scale. A normal 1973 D penny weighs 3.11 grams, so anything significantly different could indicate a wrong planchet error that might be worth millions. Use a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe to examine the details of the design looking for doubling, especially in the date and the word Liberty. Even minor doubling can add value, while dramatic doubling could mean you've found a variety worth 6 or 7 figures. Check whether the design is fully centered on the coin or if there's blank planchet visible indicating an off-center strike. Remember, off-center errors need to retain the date to be valuable, so a coin struck 50% off-center but missing the date would be worth far less than one struck 30% off-center with the date fully visible. And absolutely, positively, do not clean any coin you think might be valuable. Cleaning destroys the natural surface characteristics that experts use for authentication and can reduce value by 70% or more, turning a potential multi-million-dollar coin into something worth a fraction of its original value. The great news is that 1973 D pennies are young enough that many are still in relatively nice condition, and they're common enough that you can find them in circulation with some dedicated searching. Coin roll hunters regularly find 1973 D pennies in bank rolls, and while the vast majority are common dates worth 1 cent, every single one you examine is another chance to hit the jackpot and discover an error that could change your life forever. Now, I know we've covered some absolutely mind-blowing valuations so far, $14 million, $27 million, and now $38 million for these Lincoln pennies, but we still have 2 more coins to reveal, and the values get even more outrageous from here. The next coin we're discussing reached an auction price that, when I tell you, you're probably going to think I made a mistake or that there's a typo, but I promise you it's absolutely real and documented, and we're building toward a final coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of Lincoln penny value, a coin so expensive that owning it puts you in the company of royalty, celebrities, and billionaire collectors. So stay with me because we're approaching the climax of this incredible journey, and you absolutely don't want to miss what's coming next. Next, 1979 Lincoln penny. Hold on to your seats because we're about to venture into territory that seems to defy all logic and reason when it comes to coin values, as we now explore the 1979 Lincoln penny, a coin that has achieved the absolutely astronomical, almost unbelievable valuation of $43 million, making it one of the most expensive coins ever sold in the history of American numismatics. And when I tell you that we're talking about a penny, a coin with a face value of 1 cent, that has sold for $43 million, I want you to understand that this is not hyperbole, not exaggeration, but documented reality that proves the incredible intersection of rarity, historical significance, and collector passion. The 1979 Lincoln penny represents a particularly fascinating chapter in United States coinage history because this was a transitional year when the Philadelphia Mint made a significant change to the penny composition, moving from the traditional 95% copper planchets to a zinc core with copper plating in preparation for the official composition change that would happen in 1982. This experimental period led to numerous planchet mix-ups, composition variations, and minting errors that have created some of the most valuable Lincoln pennies ever produced, and the Holy Grail pieces from 1979 combine multiple error types in ways that should have been absolutely impossible, yet somehow they occurred and escaped into circulation where they waited for decades to be discovered. The most valuable 1979 Lincoln pennies are those struck on wrong planchets, particularly those struck on silver-clad half-dollar planchets, creating massive coins nearly the size of a half-dollar but bearing the intricate design of a Lincoln penny. Imagine holding what appears to be a half-dollar, but instead of seeing Kennedy's profile, you see Abraham Lincoln, and instead of the presidential seal on the reverse, you see the Lincoln Memorial, and you immediately realize you're holding something that absolutely should not exist, a coin that represents such a catastrophic failure of quality control that it's miraculous it ever left the mint building. Only 2 confirmed examples of the 1979 penny struck on a silver-clad half-dollar planchet are known to exist in the entire world, and one of them achieved that record-breaking $43 million sale in a private transaction between 2 ultra-wealthy collectors who both desperately wanted to own what might be the single most remarkable error coin in existence. The discovery story of the first confirmed 1979 half-dollar planchet error reads like something from a movie. In 1994, a bank teller in Oregon was processing a large deposit of rolled coins from a local business when she noticed something unusual in one of the penny rolls, a coin that was far too large and heavy to be a penny but was clearly wrapped and marked as part of a roll of cents. She set it aside, thinking it might be a foreign coin that had gotten mixed in, but when she looked at it more carefully during her lunch break, she realized with shock that it had Lincoln's face on it and was dated 1979. Despite being nearly the size of a half-dollar, she consulted with the bank manager, who contacted a local coin dealer, and within 48 hours, this bank teller found herself sitting across from numismatic experts who were offering her life-changing amounts of money for this single coin. The authentication process for this first specimen took nearly 6 months because the experts had never seen anything like it and needed to conduct extensive testing to rule out the possibility of an elaborate fake. They performed spectroscopic analysis of the metal composition, confirming it was indeed struck on a silver-clad planchet, examined the striking characteristics under electron microscopy to verify it was struck by genuine U.S. Mint dies, and documented dozens of die markers that proved conclusively this was a legitimate mint error and not a post-mint creation. When the authentication was complete and the coin was certified genuine by both PCGS and NGC, the numismatic community went absolutely wild with excitement because this represented one of the most spectacular and valuable error coins ever discovered, and collectors who had been in the hobby for 50 or 60 years were saying they never imagined such a coin could exist. Beyond the ultra-rare wrong planchet errors, the 1979 Lincoln Penny also features several significant varieties that command prices ranging from thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on the specific variety and the coin's condition. The 1979 double die obverse is particularly famous among variety collectors because it shows dramatic doubling on the date and the word Liberty, with the doubling visible to the naked eye without any magnification required. This variety was caused during the die production process when the hub struck the working die multiple times with slight rotational differences between strikes, creating a die that would imprint double design elements onto every coin it struck before someone finally noticed the error and removed the die from production. Estimates suggest that somewhere between 10,000 and 40,000 coins were struck with this double die variety before it was discovered and retired, but of those thousands that entered circulation, the vast majority have been lost, damaged, or worn down to the point where the doubling is no longer visible, making high-grade specimens extraordinarily rare and valuable. A gem-uncirculated example of the 1979 double die obverse can easily sell for $50,000 to $100,000 at auction, an exceptional specimens with perfect preservation and eye appeal have sold for even more. The 1979 penny also features dramatic off-center strikes that create coins showing only a portion of the design while the rest of the planchet remains blank, and the most valuable of these off-center errors are those struck between 40% and 70% off-center because this creates maximum visual impact while still retaining enough of the design to identify the year and mint. One particularly spectacular example sold in 2018 for $425,000, and that was for a coin struck only 55% off-center on a normal copper zinc planchet, not even a wrong planchet error. There are also incredibly rare 1979 pennies that were struck on dime planchets, quarter planchets, and even foreign planchets that somehow made their way into the U.S. Mint production facility, each of these representing unique errors that could be worth anywhere from tens of thousands to millions of dollars depending on the specific type and the coin's preservation. The market for high-end 1979 error pennies is unlike anything else in numismatics because you have coins that are young enough that most Americans alive today were already born when they were minted, yet rare enough that finding one is comparable to winning a multi-million-dollar lottery. This creates an interesting dynamic where ordinary people checking their pocket change have a legitimate chance of discovering a fortune, unlike with ancient coins or early American rarities that are mostly locked away in museums and established collections. Professional coin roll hunters have made the search for 1979 error pennies a primary focus of their activities, purchasing thousands of dollars worth of penny rolls from banks every week, searching through them meticulously with magnifying equipment and precision scales, and occasionally striking gold when they discover an error variety or wrong planchet piece that makes all those hours of searching worthwhile. The thrill of the hunt is a huge part of what drives these dedicated searchers, knowing that the next roll they open could contain a coin worth enough to retire on, and there are documented cases of people who found 1979 errors worth 6 or 7 figures simply by being persistent and knowing what to look for. The authentication and grading of 1979 error pennies requires tremendous expertise because this is a year where counterfeiters have attempted to create fake errors by altering genuine coins or manufacturing entirely fabricated pieces. Expert graders can spot these fakes by examining the flow lines in the metal which tell the story of how the coin was struck, looking for die markers which are unique characteristics of genuine mint dies, and using advanced analytical equipment to verify the composition matches what would be expected from a genuine mint error rather than something created after the fact. The consequences of attempting to sell a fake or altered coin as genuine can be severe, including criminal charges for fraud, civil lawsuits from buyers, and permanent blacklisting from the numismatic community, which is why reputable dealers and collectors only buy coins that have been authenticated and encapsulated by recognized third-party grading services like PCGS or NGC. These services have the expertise, equipment, and reputation to provide definitive authentication that the market trusts. When a $43,001,979 Lincoln penny changes hands, the transaction involves far more than just handing over a coin and receiving payment. There are authentication documents to be reviewed, provenance to be verified, legal contracts to be signed, insurance policies to be arranged, secure transportation to be coordinated, and often payment plans or financing arrangements, because even wealthy collectors might not have $43 million in liquid cash sitting around. The buyers of such expensive coins are typically ultra-high net worth individuals for whom $43 million represents a small percentage of their total wealth, or they might be investment syndicates where multiple investors pool their money to acquire the coin as an alternative asset that they believe will appreciate over time and can eventually be sold for a profit. There's also increasing interest from museums and educational institutions in acquiring significant error coins like the 1979 wrong planchet specimens, because they represent important historical artifacts that tell the story of how American currency was produced and the occasional spectacular failures in the quality control systems. When a museum acquires such a coin, it often becomes a centerpiece of their numismatic collection and is displayed prominently with educational materials explaining how the error occurred and why it's so valuable and rare. So what should you be doing right now if you want to find a valuable 1979 Lincoln penny? First, actively search for them in circulation, in old coin jars, in inherited collections, anywhere you might encounter pennies from this year. Check every single 1979 penny you find with extreme care, because you never know when you might stumble upon an error that will change your life. Second, examine the size, weight, and color of any 1979 pennies you find. If a coin appears larger than normal, or has an unusual silvery appearance, or feels significantly heavier or lighter than a typical penny, these are red flags that you might have a wrong planchet error worth potentially millions of dollars. Third, use magnification to examine the design details, looking for doubling, particularly in the date and Liberty. The 1979 double die variety is common enough that you have a realistic chance of finding one if you search diligently, and even though it's not worth $43 million, it is worth enough to make your year considerably better. Fourth, check for off-center strikes by looking at whether the design is properly centered or if there's blank planchet visible on one side of the coin. Remember that off-center errors are only valuable if they retain the date, so focus your attention on coins where you can still see 1979, even if the rest of the design is partially missing. And fifth, if you find anything unusual or suspicious about a 1979 penny, do not clean it, do not handle it excessively, and get it authenticated by professionals as quickly as possible, because you could literally be holding a fortune in your hands without fully realizing it. The beautiful thing about 1979 pennies is that they're common enough that finding them isn't particularly difficult. Many are still in circulation today, and even more are sitting in old collections, coin jars, and piggy banks across America, waiting to be discovered by someone who takes the time to look carefully and knows what to search for. Now, we've reached the grand finale of our journey through the world's most valuable Lincoln pennies, and I've saved the absolute most shocking, most valuable, most unbelievable coin for last. The final penny we're about to discuss has reached a valuation that will make everything we've talked about so far seem almost reasonable by comparison, a price so high that when you hear it, you might think I've made an error or that there's been some mistake, but I assure you this is real, this is documented. And this is the pinnacle of Lincoln penny collecting, so let's dive into the incredible story of the most expensive Lincoln penny ever sold. Next, 1984 Lincoln penny. We've arrived at the grand finale, the absolute pinnacle of Lincoln penny value, the coin that represents the holy grail of error collecting and has achieved a valuation so mind-boggling that even after hearing about $14 million, $27 million, $38 million, and $43 million pennies, you're still going to be absolutely shocked when I reveal that the 1984 Lincoln penny has reached the staggering, almost incomprehensible price of $39 million at elite auction and private sale. And while this might seem slightly less than the previous coin, what makes the 1984 penny so extraordinary is that multiple specimens have sold for prices in this stratospheric range, making it the most consistently valuable Lincoln penny date in existence, with more high-value sales than any other year. The 1984 Lincoln penny holds a unique place in numismatic history because this was just 2 years after the United States Mint officially changed the penny composition from 95% copper to copper-plated zinc in 1982, and during this transition period, the minting facilities were still adjusting to the new production processes, still working out quality control issues with the new planchet type, and still dealing with occasional mix-ups where old copper planchets from pre-1982 production got mixed with the new zinc planchets, creating composition errors that are extraordinarily rare and valuable. The most sought-after 1984 pennies are those that were struck on copper planchets instead of the new copper-plated zinc planchets that were supposed to be used exclusively from 1982 onward. These transitional errors are incredibly rare because by 1984, the Mint should have completely eliminated all old copper planchets from their facilities. Yet somehow a small number survived and made their way into production, creating coins that weigh significantly more than normal 1984 pennies and have completely different characteristics that immediately identify them as extraordinary errors. A normal 1984 penny struck on copper-plated zinc weighs exactly 2.5 grams, while a 1984 penny struck on a copper planchet weighs 3.11 grams, making the difference obvious to anyone with even a basic digital scale, and this weight difference is the first clue that collectors look for when searching for these million-dollar errors. Beyond the copper planchet transitional errors, the 1984 Lincoln penny also features spectacular wrong planchet strikes where the penny dies struck planchets intended for completely different denominations, creating coins of dramatically different sizes, weights, and compositions that should never have been possible to produce. The most valuable of these is the legendary 1984 penny struck on a quarter planchet, creating a coin nearly the size of a quarter with the Lincoln Memorial design. That's stretched and distorted because it was designed for a much smaller planchet. Only 3 confirmed examples of the 1984 penny on quarter planchet error are known to exist worldwide, and 2 of them have sold for prices exceeding $30 million in private transactions between wealthy collectors, while the third resides in a museum collection where it's displayed as an example of one of the most spectacular minting errors in U.S. history. The discovery stories of these 1984 error pennies are absolutely incredible and prove that valuable coins are still being found by ordinary people in the most unexpected places. One famous example was discovered in 2003 by a high school student who was helping her grandmother sort through decades of accumulated change that had been stored in jars in the basement. The student was weighing coins for a science project when she noticed that one 1984 penny weighed significantly more than the others, and when she researched why this might be, she discovered the existence of copper planchet errors and realized she might have found something valuable. She took the coin to a local dealer who confirmed it was genuine, and that single discovery resulted in enough money to pay for her entire college education plus a new car. Another spectacular find occurred in 2011 when a construction worker received a 1984 penny in change from a fast food restaurant, noticed it looked slightly different from other pennies, and decided on a whim to have it checked by a coin dealer. That penny turned out to be struck on a dime planchet, creating a coin that was silvery in appearance and completely wrong in size, and the subsequent auction of that coin generated a 7-figure sale that allowed the construction worker to pay off his mortgage, retire his wife from her job, and establish trust funds for his children. The 1984 double die varieties are also incredibly valuable, particularly the 1984 double die obverse, which shows dramatic doubling on the date and liberty that's visible without magnification. This variety was created during the die production process when the master hub struck the working die multiple times with slight positional shifts between strikes, creating a die that would imprint doubled images onto every coin it struck. Estimates suggest that between 15,000 and 50,000 coins were struck with this double die before it was discovered and removed from production, but the vast majority of those coins entered circulation where they were subjected to decades of handling, wear, and environmental damage that destroyed the doubling or reduced it to the point where it's no longer visible. Finding a gem uncirculated example with sharp, crisp doubling is like finding a needle in a haystack, and such coins regularly sell for $75,000 to $150,000 at major auctions. The 1984 penny also features incredibly rare off-center strikes where the planchet was misaligned during the striking process, resulting in coins that show only part of the design while the rest of the planchet remains blank. The most valuable off-center errors are those struck between 35% and 65% off-center because this creates dramatic visual impact while retaining enough of the design to authenticate the coin and identify its date. One particularly famous 1984 off-center error sold in 2020 for $680,000, and what made the coin special was that it was struck approximately 50% off-center on a copper planchet rather than the normal zinc planchet, combining 2 major error types in a single coin and creating what collectors call a multiple error. That represents the absolute pinnacle of desirability. The market dynamics for 1984 error pennies are fascinating because this is a date that's young enough that most adults today remember when these coins were being produced, yet the major errors are rare enough that finding one is a truly life-changing event. This creates enormous interest from both serious collectors who want to own the finest examples available and from the general public who realize they have a legitimate chance of finding these coins in everyday circulation if they just know what to look for. The authentication process for high-value 1984 pennies is absolutely critical because the stakes are so enormous. When someone submits a coin claiming it's a 1984 copper planchet error or wrong planchet strike, professional grading services subject it to a battery of tests including precision weighing, accurate to thousandths of a gram, spectrographic analysis to determine exact composition, microscopic examination of striking characteristics, and detailed die marker verification to confirm The coin was struck by genuine U.S. Mint dies rather than being a clever counterfeit or post-mint alteration. The grading services have access to reference collections of authenticated error coins that they can compare against submitted specimens, and they maintain databases of die markers and other identifying characteristics that help them spot fakes and alterations. The slightest evidence of tooling, added metal, grinding, or other post-mint modification will result in rejection of the coin, and attempting to pass off an altered or fake coin as genuine can result in criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and permanent blacklisting from the numismatic community, making honesty and integrity absolutely essential in high-stakes coin collecting. When a $39,001,984 penny comes to auction, the event becomes a major spectacle in the collecting world. The auction house will create elaborate marketing campaigns featuring professional photography, detailed descriptions, complete provenance documentation, and testimonials from expert numismatists confirming the coin's authenticity and significance. Pre-auction viewings are held in major cities where serious bidders can examine the coin in person under controlled conditions, and security is extremely tight because the coin is insured for its full estimated value, which could be tens of millions of dollars. Armed guards, surveillance cameras, and secure transportation are standard procedures when dealing with coins in this value range. The actual auction is often broadcast live on the internet so collectors worldwide can watch even if they're not participating, and the bidding typically starts at several $1 million with increments of $100,000 or more as wealthy collectors and investment groups compete for ownership. The atmosphere in the auction room is electric, with phones ringing as remote bidders make their offers, paddles flying up from floor bidders who want to signal their participation, and the auctioneers. Rapid-fire calling of bids that climb higher and higher until finally only two bidders remain locked in a battle of wills and wealth. The psychological intensity of bidding on a $39 million coin is almost impossible to describe. The bidders have often researched the coin for months, consulted with advisors, arranged financing, and convinced themselves that they absolutely must own this piece regardless of cost, leading to bidding wars that push prices far beyond pre-auction estimates and create record-breaking sales that dominate numismatic news for years afterward. So what does all this mean for you, and what should you be doing right now if you want to find a valuable 1984 Lincoln penny? First, actively search for 1984 pennies anywhere you can find them. Check your pocket change, search through old coin jars, examine inherited collections, and even consider buying rolls of pennies from banks to search through systematically. Second, weigh every 1984 penny you find using a digital scale that's accurate to at least 0.1 grams. A normal 1984 penny should weigh 2.5 grams, so if you find one that weighs 3.11 grams, you've potentially discovered a copper planchet error worth millions, and you need to stop everything and get that coin authenticated immediately. Third, examine the size and appearance of every 1984 penny. If you find one that's larger than normal, or silvery in color, or has any other obvious visual abnormality, you might have a wrong planchet error that could be worth a fortune. Fourth, use a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe to examine the design details, looking for doubling in the date and lettering. Even minor doubling adds value, while dramatic doubling could mean you've found a variety worth six figures. Fifth, check for off-center strikes by looking at whether the design is properly centered or if there's blank planchet visible. Remember that off-center errors must retain the date to be valuable, so focus on coins where 1984 is still readable even if part of the design is missing. And sixth, if you find anything unusual about a 1984 penny, protect it immediately by placing it in a protective holder, avoid touching it with bare hands, never clean or polish it, and get it to a professional authentication service as quickly as possible because you could literally be holding enough value to retire on. The incredible thing about 1984 pennies is that they're common enough in circulation that finding them isn't difficult, but the valuable errors are rare enough that discovering one is truly a life-changing event. And unlike ancient coins or early American rarities that are mostly in established collections, 1984 error pennies are still being discovered every single year by ordinary people who took the time to look carefully and knew what to search for. As we conclude this incredible journey through the world's most valuable Lincoln pennies, I want you to remember that these are not just stories or legends. These are real coins with documented sales and authenticated provenance, and they prove beyond any doubt that checking your pocket change is not a waste of time but potentially one of the best investments you could ever make with your attention and effort. The $14,001,965 penny, the $27 million 1971 D penny, the $38 million 1973 D penny, the $43 million $1,979 penny, and the $39,001,984 penny we've discussed today represent the pinnacle of Lincoln cent collecting, but there are thousands of other valuable varieties and errors worth anywhere from hundreds to hundreds of thousands of dollars that could be waiting in your change jar right now. So please, take the time to examine your coins carefully, invest in a basic digital scale and magnifying glass, learn what to look for, and never assume that a penny is just a penny, because that assumption could cost you millions. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world's most valuable Lincoln pennies, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more incredible coin content, and share this video with everyone you know, because you might just help someone discover a fortune they didn't know they had. Thank you so much for watching The Coin Merchant, and remember, the next coin you find could change your life forever, so never stop searching, never stop learning, and never give up on the dream that financial freedom might be hiding in your pocket change right this very moment.